What is up, folks? My name is Chris, and I am your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at the 12-game Week 1 slate of the NFL season here on DraftKings and FanDuel. That's right, we are finally back with some regular season football action, and we could not be more excited to dive into some of the top plays for this slate for you. If you've been with us before, then you know that our usual agenda of the show is to go through the biggest favorites in betting markets. That usually gives us a good indication of which offenses are going to be playing in positive game script situations, and therefore their running backs will be in the best position to succeed on Sunday. So let's just dive right on into it. We have a lot of things to discuss, a lot of new players in the league, and we're going to be looking to play quite a few of them here this weekend in the NFL. And in week number 1, your biggest favorite on this slate is actually going to be the Denver Broncos at home facing the Tennessee Titans and rookie Cam Ward to begin the season. The Broncos listed J.K. Dobbins as the starting running back here to begin the season, and people are kind of skeptical of this, right? Because we have rookie R.J. Harvey behind him on the depth chart, and everyone's really excited to see what kind of role Harvey is going to have here early on. Now, I think if you look at most projection models, they're going to project these guys fairly close in production. Our proprietary OF index ranking that we use actually is slightly higher on RJ Harvey here in week number 1. I have filtered the RB page here for just Denver Broncos running backs. They're priced very similarly. Harvey's $5,800 on DraftKings, Dobbins is $5,500. They're both $5,700 on FanDuel, and they're both projected to be about 1% owned in DFS tournaments this week. Projected for a similar amount of weighted opportunities to touch the football, right around 20 touches is what we expect for each of these guys. So the field is hedging on this, right? The projection, and there's plenty of running backs that are playing in situations where we know it's pretty clear where the touches are going to go. So people are shying away from Denver's backfield here, but Denver, theoretically, in the best position to succeed, favored by 9.5 points at home. Not in my core here for plays, but worth thinking about for tournaments with Denver being favored so heavily. Speaking of teams that are favored heavily with running backs that nobody really wants to play in DFS this weekend, we have the Washington Commanders. They're favored by 6.5 points in betting markets. Their traditional third down back, passing down back, Austin Eckler, is listed as the starting running back after the preseason trade of Brian Robinson to the San Francisco 49ers. The Commanders then went and listed their running backs behind Eckler, basically in order of their veteran status on the roster. We have Jeremy McNichols, we have Chris Rodriguez, and then we have rookie Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill, who I believe, obviously, the player base here is most excited about, wants to see what the 7th-round rookie here can do for the Commanders. But I think here in week number 1, we're going to shy away from this ambiguous backfield situation, despite Washington being favored by 6.5 points against the New York Giants this week at home. The Arizona Cardinals. This is where we start to get into the plays that we're into for low risk this week. James Conner is just $6,100 here, and the Arizona Cardinals are going on the road to face the New Orleans Saints, who are kind of by consensus expected to be the worst team in the league this year. Last year, the Saints were the 2nd worst rush defense in the NFL, and the Cardinals actually had a top 6 run blocking offensive line. So this is a phenomenal spot for James Conner to continue to be a workhorse running back for the Arizona Cardinals and be someone that we can count on for production in daily fantasy sports contests here in week number 1. So James Conner, in addition to the 2 running backs I have on the screen here, extremely viable play this week in all contest types, but low-risk contests especially. Cincinnati Bengals are favored by 4.5 points on the road against the Cleveland Browns, and Chase Brown is going to look to pick up right where he left off at the end of 2024 when the Bengals went on that huge winning streak to make a push for the playoffs, which of course fell just short by a tiebreaker. Brown missed the Week 18 game with an injury. We see right on the screen here that he basically had 20 to 25 touches every single time he suited up and took the field for the Bengals. And this is a spot where Brown really avoided any true competition being added to his team to worry about for touches. We have rookie Taj Brooks behind him in the backfield, but Zach Moss no longer with the team. Samaje Perine is back as a passing down back only. I do think Chase Brown can resume his 80% of team rushes, 7 to 10% of team targets role here against the Browns defense that was league average at best, defending the rush and league average in the passing game as well. So Chase Brown at a modest price of $6,600 on DraftKings, an extremely strong play at the running back position this week and should definitely be in low-risk lineups. as a result. Now, other than spreads and totals, going back to our model for running backs, when we look at what's projected to be the most popular here this week, I think we're going to see a little bit of a shift here. I'm recording this Friday night about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the East Coast. Christian McCaffrey right now projecting to be the most popular play on the slate at running back. I can almost certainly guarantee at this point that's not going to happen. He was limited in practice on Thursday, did not practice on Friday, and was listed officially as questionable with a calf injury, that same calf injury that basically knocked him out for half the season to begin the year. Last year, I think the field is going to steer clear of this in low-risk contests, and McCaffrey becomes high-risk only. In fact, we kind of have to question, guys, whether or not, even if he is active, is he actually going to see that workload that we're used to seeing him have when he is available to play? I wonder what San Francisco is going to do here with Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerrero behind him. Might be an opportunity to just kind of ease McCaffrey into the offense here to begin the season because he's so much more valuable to what they have throughout the entire campaign of a season than in just one particular game. Really, really worried about jamming injuries into my lineup to begin the season here. So I do think McCaffrey probably comes down in ownership and therefore is no longer a great low-risk play. The next most popular play is in our lineup already here. It's Devin Achane with the Miami Dolphins. Achane, very, very efficient every single time he touches the football, and he kind of has to be because Miami's offensive line, their run blocking especially, was worse in the league last year, and I don't know if we're anticipating a drastic turnaround there. So he's going to have to continue to be very flashy and make big plays of his own accord, which we know he is capable of here. Facing the Indianapolis Colts on the road, the Colts were roughly league average defending the rush, and they were slightly above average defending running backs in the passing game. Achane's involvement in the passing game is the biggest reason why we'd be interested in him in a neutral to slightly pass-heavy game script here, but do think he has a really good chance to see a ton of work here this week. Did have a little bit of a calf injury throughout the preseason, but by all accounts is being reported as completely good to go here on Sunday and is not on the injury report whatsoever. I think Achane, James Conner, and Chase Brown are going to be your big three for low-risk contests on both DraftKings and FanDuel, and I think you should probably heavily consider just running all three, getting that floor of 50 to 60 touches into your lineup with those three modestly priced running backs here this week. If you're looking for two other plays that I think have a really, really great chance of working in our favor here in high-risk contests this week, I'm going to stick in that same game with the Miami Dolphins and turn to Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Now, Taylor isn't really a great piece to pair with a quarterback. He doesn't typically see a ton of volume in the passing game. Daniel Jones, now under center, might be a little bit more likely to run a traditional offense than Anthony Richardson, which could be a good sign for Jonathan Taylor, but we're expecting Taylor to get his normal volume and allotment of carries on early downs in this backfield in a game where Indianapolis is favored by 1.5, facing a Dolphins defense that was below average defending the rush. This is a good spot for Jonathan Taylor to get off to a great start in the Colts home opener here in 2025. And perhaps my personal favorite play on the slate, but especially at the running back position in high-risk contests, Jahmyr Gibbs. When we look at what Gibbs did at the very end of the season for the Lions last year with David Montgomery nursing an injury, I really think he proved to this coaching staff that he deserves a bell cow role here going into the 2025 season. Massive amount of fantasy points, weeks 15 through 20, the playoff game that the Lions had last year against the Washington Commanders. The touchdown production was incredible. Production in the passing game was incredible. I'm kind of expecting the usage there to continue. I think Gibbs will outtouch Montgomery 2-1, probably have 60 to 70% of team rushes, and hopefully compete for about 10 to 15% of team targets. Now, on the road here against the Green Bay Packers, yeah, he is a little bit of a slight underdog, but I think that is probably a spot that we should be willing to speculate on Gibbs outkicking his coverage a little bit here because he certainly has proven that he is capable of doing that every single time he has taken the field of late. And I think really all the tea leaves that we have heard out of Detroit this summer as they're preparing for this season is that we're not going to expect the same old 1A, 1B running back tandem of Thunder and Lightning here with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. It does feel like it is going to be more of the Jahmyr Gibbs show here in 2025. And I do think if that materializes, you will start to see this DFS price creep ever higher and make Gibbs the most expensive running back on the slate weekly. He's pretty close to that this week, but he's not quite there. Therefore, I think we do have an opportunity to take advantage of his ranking. Something that makes Gibbs playable every single week is that the Lions have phenomenal offensive line play. They had the best run blocking offensive line by adjusted line yards in 2024. So I do think they have a chance to get off to a strong start here once again in 2025. Okay. Those are the running back plays. Should mention on FanDuel, Chase Brown, Devin Achane, James Conner, still modestly priced here and leaves us with plenty of salary to finish off a low-risk lineup. Jumping back over to DraftKings to continue the discussion this week. You have two quarterbacks that are going to be extremely popular in low-risk contests this week. Trevor Lawrence at just $5,300 here on DraftKings facing a Carolina Panthers pass defense that wasn't difficult for quarterbacks to throw against last year. Panthers were the 29th ranked pass defense. The Jaguars had a top 10 pass blocking offensive line. Lawrence has some of the most dynamic weapons in the National Football League in Brian Thomas Jr. and now rookie Travis Hunter at wide receiver out of the University of Colorado. A really good spot here for Trevor Lawrence to give us a solid amount of points here at a modest price. It's going to have to come through the air. There's not going to be a lot of rushing production, but of all the quarterbacks that are priced in this range, he seems to be in the best matchup, and the field agrees with Jacksonville favored by 3.5 points here in week number 1. Trevor Lawrence is going to be the most popular value play at the quarterback position for low-risk contests. If you want the absolute dub plays at the position, Jaden Daniels with his dual threat skill set, with his floor of rushing production, with his outstanding production in the passing game as well here against the New York Giants. He also is going to be extremely popular this week, the most expensive quarterback on the slate, facing a Giants pass defense that was the third worst pass defense in the NFL last year. And with all of the uncertainty at running back, maybe it's Jaden Daniels that just takes advantage of that in goal to go and gotta have it situations for the Commanders, which just raises his floor ceiling combination in general. And it's not hard to get Daniels into our lineups this week whatsoever. So he'll be popular in low-risk contests. And then finally, Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, the dream offense in fantasy football specifically, because the Bengals have a defense that basically keeps other teams in games routinely, and that keeps Joe Burrow aggressive late in games, throwing the ball to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Mike Gesicki and Andre Yosfach, and of course Chase Brown in the backfield as well. So Joe Burrow at just $6,900 here on DraftKings, also probably going to be very popular in all contest types because the Bengals and the Browns are playing in the highest total game on this slate at 48.5 points at this time. Low risk wide receivers. When we look for low risk wide receivers to play in contests, what I'm typically looking for are mispriced players that are going to see more targets than their salary reflects. But we're also looking at high ownership. And high ownership is definitely a good reflection of opportunity because the field is pretty sharp with these plays. The highest projected owned wide receiver in week number 1 is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Served as their de facto wide receiver 1 last year. Yeah, a little bit of competition this year with number 2 pick Travis Hunter at wide receiver, but with Jacksonville talking about getting Hunter some work at defensive back, I do think we can safely pencil Thomas into a dynamic role where they move him all over the field and he sees the vast majority of the targets in this offense. We're projecting him for 10 plus targets here this week against the Panthers, and the Panthers were extremely soft against wide receiver 1s last year. So not going to be gaining a huge edge on the field by playing Brian Thomas, but what you're going to do is block your opponents by having him in your lineup because he's going to be extremely popular here in week number 1, and that makes him a phenomenal play. Now, first rookie that I want to have a dedicated discussion about, Emeka Egbuka here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, is going to be their number 2 wide receiver alongside Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's going to be out for a few weeks with his knee injury. Jalen McMillan suffered a neck injury in the preseason. That's going to hold him out. So we're looking at a 3 wide receiver set for the Buccaneers of Mike Evans, Emeka Egbuka, and maybe Sterling Shepard out of the slot. So not really a lot behind Egbuka to keep him off the field here. And by all reports out of Tampa Bay training camp, Egbuka has also been moving all over the field. He can run slot routes. He can run outside routes. So very dynamic player here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we are expecting Egbuka to be one of the most, not just one of the most popular plays at the position, but also expecting the Ohio State Buckeye here to see 10 plus targets as well at just $4,600 here on DraftKings. And when we scoot back on over to FanDuel and we check out Egbuka, he is $5,000, extremely playable over here as well. That leaves us with plenty of salary to finish off a low-risk lineup this week. So I do think Brian Thomas Jr. and Emeka Egbuka are my two favorite individual wide receivers for low-risk contests. And then, yeah, you have Jamar Chase, who's the number one receiver in the NFL. He'll be popular with Cincinnati having the highest implied team total this week. I mentioned Egbuka, obviously Evans at just $6,600. He will be popular as well. We have Drake London with the Atlanta Falcons as their number one receiver. He's projecting for 9 plus targets in our model at a modest price. He's on this list. The other place we can go is another rookie, and that's going to be Tet McMillan with the Carolina Panthers, and actually kind of functions as a bringback with your, by default, I guess, chalk Jacksonville Jaguars low-risk stack that everybody wants to play here. You have Tet McMillan, you have Trevor Lawrence, you have Brian Thomas Jr., and that's a nice 2-1 stack that you can use in your lineups. The Arizona alum here, Tet McMillan, selected with the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft this past spring. Going to slide right into the number one wide receiver role for the Panthers, especially now that Adam Thielen is no longer in the fold for them. We're expecting McMillan, Xavier Legette to be your primary receivers for the Panthers, with Hunter Renfrow, welcome back to the NFL, as the slot receiver here for Carolina. So pencil in McMillan for a large amount of work against a Jacksonville defense that was the worst defense defending the pass last year. So Carolina and Jacksonville actually has potential to be one of the more fantasy-friendly matchups, and that's why we have those players littered in our low-risk lineup here. David Njoku with the Cleveland Browns, one of the most popular tight end plays that you can get into your lineups this week. But we also have Brock Bowers, who projects for 10 plus targets. We have Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Sam Laporta, all projecting for 7 plus targets in the Occupy model this week. So they're all viable options in low-risk contests. Our favorite way to play low-risk contests with the tight end is just maximize target opportunities that you can get in your lineup. So any of these guys, I think, would be strong plays in your low-risk lineups. That's a pretty good rundown, I think, of where we stand here in week number 1 for low risk. Now, one of the things we like to look at week in and week out is underperforming wide receivers. So that's going to be receivers that are seeing a ton of playing time, targets, and air yards, but aren't necessarily converting those into fantasy production. We should have that list available to go over on these videos and in our daily plug, which is the article written format of our top plays available for subscribers at occupyfantasy.com and linked in the description of the video below. Between now and then, I'm just going to be highlighting some plays that we're forecasting to be less than 5% owned, because typically the underperforming wide receivers are also going to be very, very low owned in high-risk contests. So these are usually our best plays for large field tournaments, and we have a ton of those this week in week number 1 with big money up for grabs. So my favorite play that is projecting to be under 5% this week at wide receiver, it's going to be a wide receiver who's playing for a team with the lowest implied team total on the slate, and I am, of course, talking about Calvin Ridley with the Tennessee Titans. But when we look at the fact that he's priced at just $5,000, and he should have tremendous upside to see 7, 8, 9, 10 plus targets from rookie Cam Ward here against the Denver Broncos, being the biggest underdog certainly projects and forecasts for a passing game script for the Titans here. I could easily see Ridley outscoring his peers in this salary range of like $4,500 to $5,500 here. Easily could score 20 to 25 plus fantasy points. That's the thing about this week when you look at the wide receiver position. When you get into this range of $5,500 to $4,500, I'll just start saying some names here, guys. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jameson Williams, Jerry Jeudy, Jaden Reed, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, Tet McMillan, who we already talked about, Jacoby Myers, Chris Olave, Calvin Ridley, who we're just on. I'll stop here right at 5,000. Every single one of these guys is capable of giving us 20 to 25 plus fantasy points, and so I think that there is some merit to considering playing guys that are not going to be super popular in this salary range, especially if they're priced right next to guys that are going to be extremely popular. And you absolutely have that here with Calvin Ridley because he's priced right next to Ted McMillan, and he's priced right next to, a little bit higher than, but right next to Emeka Egbuka. And those two guys are going to be extremely, extremely popular this week. So Calvin Ridley, one of my favorite tournament wide receiver plays this week. Check out the daily plug for the rest of those. I like to talk about my favorite stacks for high-risk tournaments. Now, we've uncovered in our research that the best way to play high-risk tournaments on DraftKings and FanDuel is to use game stacks, specifically using two teammates with a quarterback and one opponent as a bringback. That kind of holds true more later in the season when we get a little bit of a better sense for how teams are going to be using their players a bit more. We're all kind of guessing how these offenses are going to shake out. So it is likely that less correlation wins out here in week number one, especially in these large $5 lottery contests with $1 million up top on DraftKings and FanDuel. But I will still try to predict the future and give you some teams that I think have the highest upside. One of my favorite tournament stacks this week is the Detroit Lions. I think that we can get Jared Goff, we can get the aforementioned Jahmyr Gibbs, and then we can get really any of these pass catchers in Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta into our lineups and get a pretty good chance at a stack that can score a ton of points for us. Jameson Williams, another one of those receivers that projects for less than 5% ownership. Detroit, a slight road underdog here, I think actually stands out as one of the better plays for that. My favorite bringback with Green Bay is actually going to be rookie first-round pick Matthew Golden, who should be sliding right into a starting role for them with Christian Watson hurt. Expecting Golden and Romeo Doubs to be your starters on the outside this week for the Green Bay Packers. And we're expecting Jaden Reed, if he goes, to be in the slot. If Jaden Reed doesn't go, it would be Dontavian Wicks. But Golden out there got targeted pretty heavily in the preseason with Jordan Love in limited reps. I think he's a great bring back in Detroit stacks in high-risk contests. And what I would do, guys, if I'm building lineups for high-risk contests and building 3-1 stacks like we like to do here at Occupy Fantasy, I would just fill in around these plays with some of the low-risk plays that we talked about. So we can get like a Brian Thomas at receiver. You could get an Egbuka in here at receiver. We can get Achane at running back. And you've got plenty of salary left to finish this off with a cheap defense and a tight end. So definitely think that that's one of my favorite ways to play this slate in high-risk contest is the Detroit stack. It's week one. We're all excited. I'll give you one more stack that I think has a lot of upside. And that stack for me is going to be the Los Angeles Rams. It's really just going to be Puka Nacua. Had an absurd 40% plus target share in the Rams offense to close out the season last year. Look at these multiple games with 13 plus targets in the passing game. Touchdown production wasn't necessarily there, but tons of opportunities to cross over that 100-yard bonus and rack up points with 8 plus receptions. I do think Puka Nacua and Matthew Stafford is one of my favorite 2-0 stacks, but we also have opportunities with Houston to play a bringback at receiver. Nico Collins probably sees concentrated volume with 2 receivers expected to be out this week in Christian Kirk and Braxton Berrios. We have 2 rookies that are expected to start behind him, Jaden Higgins, and then Jalen Noel should be the starter in the slot with Berrios and Christian Kirk out this week. So I do think you can get Stafford, Nacua, probably get Nico Collins in here, use some of the value plays with 48.50 per player remaining to finish off your lineup. But this is another one that I think is really, really interesting in high-risk contests here this week. Can't get out of here without talking about the defenses. I do think the Denver Broncos, being the biggest favorite, are going to be the most popular defense people play this week, especially in low risk. And you can just go right down the line with the favorites this week. We have the Washington Commanders against the Giants. They should be popular. We have the Arizona Cardinals against the Saints. They should be popular. I'm going to go down a little bit, but they're still priced up. I do think the Pittsburgh Steelers playing the Jets in the lowest total game of the slate as the favorite on the road here. I think they're actually a pretty good low-risk defense as well. High-risk contests, our model likes the Detroit Lions a lot this week as a slight underdog against the Green Bay Packers as well. So I do think you could play Green Bay defense in some high-risk contests. That's going to do it for me, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out for a few minutes. We'll do this every single week throughout the rest of the NFL regular season. I'll be back every Friday with a preview of the main classic slates on DraftKings and on FanDuel. Good luck this week here in week 1, and we'll be back next week to talk to you about week 2.